Hello, welcome to this month's live. Good to have you here for those who are live with me and anyone watching the replay. Today, we're going to talk about fight, flight, or freeze, and then specific two examples. So, parents on the platform, one child had a traumatic experience in the hospital, a blood draw. I'm sure many parents have had that like singular traumatic experience with their child. So we're going to talk about remedies. What do we do when our kids have that kind of situation? And then another parent is really focused on, okay, they've resolved many of the root causes and they've seen, huge changes in their child. And so now it's how do we shift out of that chronic fight, flight, or freeze that that child was experiencing. So those are the two examples that we'll talk through today. And as always, you can certainly put any questions into the chat. I'll be looking at them. Sometimes I miss some of the comments when they come in real fast, but I do my best to answer all of the questions. So certainly feel free to drop any questions, autism related, that you have. Please do so. All right. So, fight, flight, or freeze. It is a survival mechanism and it's our autonomic nervous system. And the nervous system is getting a lot of attention, rightfully so, because we can tell ourselves, okay, yeah, that was traumatic, but like, let's just forget about it. But the body keeps the score. And that's a great book. It's actually become one of my favorite books. I've gone to it many, many times. So this is something in the whole autism journey that can't be neglected for the child or the parent. So what I'm saying, if it's not relevant to your child, to think about yourself, and if it's not relevant to you, think about your child. All right, what are the different approaches? So it depends on your doctor, right? So some conventional medicine doctors say, all right, let's just give a prescription and maybe some talk therapy or something like that. Other doctors might say, you know what, let's do some breath work, let's do some EMDR, and having that aspect. So if you go to a doctor and ask, okay, what should I do? You might get more than one answer. And I just want you to be aware that you want to create your strategy. So let's go into that first example of a traumatic blood draw. And now the child has, let's say, a fear of the hospitals, maybe fear of a particular color. So if the person was wearing, in their scrubs was wearing a particular color, this child has developed these intense fears and phobias now, but it's all stemming from that one singular event that happened. So that's not to take away of any of the other trauma that this child had experienced, but the parent is really asking about that one particular situation. Okay, so there's different approaches to do for something like this. And so the first is really somatic. So somatic experiencing. And this is therapy, and it's meant to help the body complete that fight, flight, or freeze, right? So this child is stuck in that situation. Like whenever she sees something, then it's triggered and she's right back into that traumatic experience. So in somatic experiences, you have the therapist, and the therapist walks the child through feeling different sensations in the body. So revisiting that event, and really tapping into what that felt like. And so the whole idea is the sensation is the nervous system and that feeling. So you want to walk through it and discharge that kind of survival energy. All right, and then there's another aspect to somatic experiences, and that is havering And so this is something that I've learned recently. I've done it on myself many times. And so there's three ways you can really start to unwind your nervous system yourself, right? So havering is there's three things. So you can rub your hands together, and you can do it on the more fast side, but as you do it, you're creating that warmth in your hands, but then it kind of slows down. You can see that I'm naturally exhaling, and so that's my body shifting into the sympathetic. So I'm shifting out of the parasympathetic and into the more sympathetic, relax, reline. Whenever you have that long exhale, that's like golden, right? That's your that's your nervous system just unwinding and feeling that. So that's one way you could do the havering. The other way is just really stroking. I don't know if you could see the shoulder to the elbow in a downward motion on the slow side, right? So this is something a parent can do to a child. And you could do this multiple times a day. This can be, how you express connection and love to your child. And it's also helping to unwind the nervous system. So that is one aspect when your child has experienced that singular traumatic event and you're trying to unwind it. And the third is like rubbing the forehead. So something like this you can certainly do. And sometimes it's rubbing the cheeks, although I will say for kids with autism, sometimes they still have the rooting reflex retained. And so if you stroke along their cheek, they might start their rooting reflex. So it's information for you to know. Then you can say, oh, interesting, my child has a retained primitive reflex, right? So that is the third aspect of havering. So really gently rubbing anywhere in the face. A lot of times it's the forehead. It's very soothing, but it's connected to your nervous system. So that's how you can really unwind. Okay, so that's that first aspect. Then EMDR is something I talked about last live. So there was research done on, there was 7 parents, 5 moms, 2 dads. They had teenagers with autism and emotional dysregulation, and the parents were diagnosed with child-related PTSD. And they did EMDR, all 7 of them, and they did like 3 to 5 sessions, so very, very short and targeted. And all 7 of the parents no longer had their PTSD diagnosis after the EMDR. And things also improved for their child, even though the child didn't do any EMDR. It was as the parents got more regulated than the child did as well. So EMDR is something that can be done for a child who's experienced a traumatic event. And there's different ways of doing it depending on your child and their level of ability to control their body. So you have the eye movements, and I'm probably in January or February, I'm definitely going to go experience EMDR and really get to know this technique. I've done the research on why it's so well used, and I definitely want to experience it. So I'll be able to provide more personal context in a couple of months. But so you do bilateral stimulation. So it's very similar to REM eye movements in sleep. So you're either having the gentle eye movements, so that would mean your child would have to be able to control their eyes. There's different tapping that can be done, or also sounds. And the whole idea is that alternating left and right. That's the key aspect. So if your child doesn't have full control over their body, you certainly can do it with sounds as well. And again, it's to help decharge all that emotions, that trapped emotions from that traumatic experience. So that is a second thing that can be done. And a third thing that can be done is called the Safe and Sound Protocol. So this is evidence-based, and it was developed by a neuroscientist. And basically, you're trying to stimulate the vagus nerve so that your body can downshift, right, into the whole rest and digest and get out of that fight, flight, or freeze. And so you, the child, right, is just listening to particular music. And there it's 30 minutes, 60 minutes, things like that. So if your child likes headphones, then this might be something that would be good to explore. Um, and again, the whole concept is this protocol has been developed. It's evidence based, right? This is not some wackadoo thing. This has been used for years, specifically for decreasing that whole fight, flight, or freeze. So it's definitely an option to consider. And uh, again, this is more for when it's that one singular event that you can really measure. Okay, do they still have fear of someone in a particular color or someone that looks a particular way? So this is these are the approaches for when you have that particular traumatic experience. And yes, your child can do it, but if they had a traumatic experience, I can pretty much guarantee that you had a traumatic experience. So you want to be mindful for yourself, mindful of all the stress that builds up. And so, really, anything you're doing for them to help discharge all that trauma, you really might consider yourself. All right. And again, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. Um, and I will keep an eye on it. Let's see. So we can just keep going on to the second example. So the second example is of a parent who they've resolved a lot of the root causes. So they're at a very different place in the whole autism journey, right? So usually when you start, you have more bad days than good, right? Many times you might only have bad days, occasional one or two good days, right? So that's not their experience at the moment. So they're having more good days than bad days, right? So totally different balance. But they can tell their child is still just a little amped up, and it's not something that um, they want their child to continue in that way. So when you're having this focus on decreasing the fight or flight in general, right, from all the different experiences, it can be done through those techniques that I just mentioned, right? Those are great. There's also Apollo Neuro. So I have I have mine on. So I have a video on it. I still wear my Apollo Neuro. This is not sponsored or anything. I paid for this myself. It is a great way. It's another way I layer in. How do I unwind all this stress? So there's many different therapeutic approaches that way. But when you want to really make sure that your child unwinds and you've resolved these root causes, you can start to consider, all right, are there any supplements? Are there any prescriptions that we want to use in addition, right? So you don't want to just try and medicate the issue and be like, okay, I'll just give you something. But there are ways to really layer this. So low dose naltrexone is one of them. It is commonly used with functional medicine. Now, I see lots of mistakes when this is used too early. So again, if you're trying to tell the immune system, okay, we're not under attack anymore. We're good, right? We're in a safe place, right? That is in essence what you're going to chemically say when you're giving your child something like low dose naltrexone. You want to make sure that that is true, right? So if you're living in, let's just say, moldy environment, or let's just say somehow your child is consuming heavy metals continuously, right? That is not the time to tell the body shift out of fight or flight, because it's not true. So when you give these kinds of prescriptions that are really targeted towards that, you want to make sure that it's true for the body. So that's why this is advanced information. It's not something to really start initially, these different prescriptions, because they are powerful. So sometimes parents have real negative experiences with low dose naltrexone. And the reason why typically is it's used too early. So you can't trick the body. So low dose naltrexone is one of them. Hydrocortisone is another. It's a steroid. Sometimes parents don't want to use that. Again, you have options, right? So it's not as if this is, you only have one choice. You can have that ongoing dialogue, and you really want to set your strategy. So when you incorporate all of that, there's definitely a lot to learn. So DHEA is another option. Propranolol is another option. That one is becoming quite popular because there are some doctors who give propranolol and leucovorin. They give it together to counter any potential hyperactivity and increases. So, make sure you have that conversation. Some parents are not comfortable with giving both of those at the same time. So it's really important to have a strategy and to understand what you're doing. Ketamine is another one that's kind of popular. CBD is definitely one that's used, and sometimes parents see different reactions to that. Again, so with CBD, when you're a lot of times it's used, oh, let's decrease inflammation and let's just help with sleep. CBD can really be targeted when you've removed the root causes and you're trying to shift out of that fight or flight. So there's many different ways of using that. And then there are peptides. That's a little bit on the newer side. So BPC 157 is a common one that's used. When peptides are used, I will say many functional medicine doctors who focus on autism, they're just starting to get into that area. But it certainly is an option. And some parents, are really interested into the peptides. And then supplements. So different supplements certainly can be used. And many times these kind of supplements are used a little bit earlier in the journey, many times because they are nourishing, and they're not so specific and targeted, and it's really about supporting the entire body. So supplements that shift the body out of fight or flight are commonly used earlier than prescriptions. So just keep that in mind for your strategy. Let's see. So magnesium glycinate and threonate are the two forms of magnesium that are used. They're usually used at nighttime to help with sleep. But again, it's really about unwinding that fight or flight and letting the body know, hey, relax, it's okay. L-theanine is something that is used. That I have a muse. I've started playing around with the muse and started really understanding my sleep and getting very specific. So I've actually been playing around with L-theanine at night and seeing how it impacts my brain waves. And sometimes I get a little too technical. But I just want you to know that L-theanine as a supplement can really help a lot of that kind of chatter, especially at night when you just can't kind of shut the brain off. So again, that can be used in a more general sense. And then you have different adaptogens. So things like ashwagandha, holy basil, those are really good herbs. There are different herbs. Those are the more common ones. Lemon balm. You can see a lot of these in different sleep supplements. So you might see a combination of a lot of these. And so those are adaptogens. And again, they're giving general support to the body so that the body can handle stress a bit more. So this is why you'll see this given more in the beginning of the autism journey. And then there's things like omega-3s. So yeah, it decreases inflammation, but it's also targeting cortisol and things like that. So that's another way that with a supplement, you can start shifting the body out of fight or flight and providing nourishment. So you can see how the supplements are very different than the prescriptions, just in their mode of action. And yeah, I think that about covers everything. I just wanted to make sure we have this conversation about fight or flight. Um, it's not something that is addressed a lot, but it's super important when you want to get across that finish line. And it's also important in the case of those singular traumatic events where now life is getting a bit more difficult because new fears are developing and things along those lines. So I want you to know you have tools. There's no need for your child or for yourself to continue on holding on to that stress. So it's really important to acknowledge the stress and then say, okay, what's my strategy for unwinding? Um, and that is actually everything I was going to cover. I don't think we have any questions yet. So I will, let me just check because I do miss things sometimes. Um, this is a really important aspect of the autism journey, and it gets missed just because not many people are really aware of all the ups and downs in the whole journey to get to the finish line that you want for your child, which is happy, healthy, and able to engage in a life that they want to create. So I think with that, I will end here. Thank you very much, and I will speak with you next month. Bye.